Good morning, everybody. Welcome to First Center for Spiritual Living in New York City. I want to welcome all of you on the Zoom call. And then I want to give a special welcome to the people who watch us each week on YouTube and on Facebook. If you happen to be watching us later in the week, we get many replies and comments on the social platforms. I'd like to invite you to give us a note at the center so we can invite you to our live call, our Zoom call, because there's a time afterwards for personal sharing that's very valuable. So if you're able to join us live, that's always a richer experience. So anyway, we're glad you found us, however you found us, and we appreciate your support, your contributions, and all that you're doing to support the center. We spend a lot of time each week developing themes for subjects for our broadcast. We try to have it be a little bit different each week. One thing to understand about New Thought, about religious science, is that we're always teaching what we call principle. In religious science, we talk about the principle of life, and that really means that life is responding to you always. So we're teaching you about that and how it works. We're always teaching that you're the whole bit, as Raymond Charles Barker so often said, and that life responds to you. It responds to you as you believe. That being said, we take lessons in the New Thought from philosophy. We take lessons from many of the great spiritual thinkers from the East to the West. Ernest Holmes, who found our teaching, said we are open at the top. We don't have centuries of dogma, thankfully. We don't worship in churches or in temples because we know that you don't find God, in buildings. We celebrate and we understand that this power, this God, this energy source is in every single human being that lives. We know, we celebrate this power is equally present in everyone. We understand that people are evolving. And if you're new to this, we'll say to you, you are evolving. You are a spiritual being that's evolving. And that everyone's growing at their own pace and in their own way, and this is good. Those of you who have found this teaching or found us by means of Louise or other means are really very fortunate. There's so many people in the world that are caught up right now in tremendous confusion, but this has always been the case. I'm sure many of you have heard me say that this teaching, which we call New Thought, has actually been around for a long time. You've probably also heard me say there's nothing new about New Thought. And this is true because our principles have been around throughout the ages. Ernest Holmes put a lot of information together that would be very difficult for any one of us to assimilate on our own. That's in the textbook. He was reading and studying most of his life, and he was taking the best of what was available, incorporating it into the teaching. A generation later, our own Louise, who started here at this church, or this center, took the teachings of Ernest Holmes, and she wrote the book, You Can Heal Your Life. Louise wrote the book in such a way that she took these New Thought principles, which, it's a lot of study from Holmes, but she took them and she wrote a book in such a way that the teaching became accessible to many millions of people without having to go through the hundreds of hours of study that you might have done once upon a time. When Louise said it's all very simple, she never suggested to us that it's very easy. She had a tremendous gift in teaching the ideas and presenting them in such a way that were very understandable. I'm thrilled that all of you sign in every single week because we have an opportunity always here to remind you of how great you are We remind you of your value as a spiritual being, cannot even be calculated or imagined. To remind you that you are a spiritual being with unlimited ability, and to remind you that life responds to you. It responds to you as you believe. We also remind you and tell you that you are the one you've been looking for. You might think you've been looking for the answers in the stars or from, some great teacher and all that, but you have within you the power, the thing itself. Deep within you is an infinite well of love, creative intelligence, and you are in fact an individualization of this source, this energy, this God. You've heard before, I'm sure, whatever the Father has, you have. Whatever this energy has, this God has, you have. Some of you don't like the words God or don't like using the word Father. I'm aware of that. The thing to realize is you can call it whatever you want to call it, but you are one with this energy. You are a point of awareness in it. You're a point of power in it. You're one with it, and you're one with everyone. You're one with your brother, So everybody's a part of everybody. We live in this world of energy and of connection. But I'm assuming most of the audience knows this. I don't know that everyone knows it, but I'm sure most of you do, or it's what brings us together, like-minded people. And some of you, this is kind of like revolutionary information. So it's safe to say whoever winds up here on the call is here for a reason. We come out of various traditions, all of us, that would suggest the power that we have is elsewhere. But we're here to tell you it's here. It's here in you right now, and it's responding to you always. I have a lesson today from Raymond Charles Barker, who was our founder, and who was a teacher of Louise, which deals with the high price we pay for our habitual negative thoughts. It's quite good. It was very long, and I've spent many hours in making it more brief to synthesize it. The high cost of negatives. Barker emphasized the impact of indulging in negative thinking, fear-based thinking, gossip, judgment, any and all forms of negativity we pay a huge price for. It's destructive. These patterns diminish our ability to create a positive reality, and they trap us into living a life of limitation and discontent. You don't realize, how powerful they are. They really, they prevent you from demonstrating the good things in life that you could otherwise be experiencing. None of us want to be living in a life where we feel trapped. He said our negative beliefs keep us from obtaining what we vision, what we dream, what we truly want. It's important to recognize the big price we pay for embracing negativity. Raymond Charles Barker often said, and I say all the time too, we want to learn to develop positive expectancy. Even when things are going to heck or to hell, we want to learn to see the good and find what's good and to develop positive expectancy. Thinking always only good can come from this. Saying to yourself, I could see peace, I can see peace instead of any of these negative things I'm dwelling on. I have the ability, if I really want to see that there's boundless potential here. See, this is what we call inner work. It's the inner work that we talk about. It involves a lot of self-correction, self-monitoring. Inner work requires us to let go of the old stories and for us to embrace a new story where we can write a new script. So you're always writing your own story. And you can write a script where you experience joy and happiness, abundance and freedom, instead of ain't it awful and poor me, or someone's done something to me. If you're willing to step out of the negative loops and stories, then you can transform your life and you can uplift yourself and others. And does it take work? Unfortunately, it does. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be hard. It requires a certain consistency. Staying the course, it might require meditation, is becoming more mindful. In his lesson, The High Cost of Negatives, Barker explains that it takes work to elevate and to upgrade your life. But it also, he said, takes a lot of work to be destructive with your life. See, life is going to respond to your thoughts, the negative ones and the positive ones. So it's going to take energy to improve your life, and it takes energy to keep up the negative thinking. It was Ernest Holmes, who was the founder of the teaching, who said, like Emerson before him, that we have to buy anything we desire with what he called mental coins, emphasizing that we can only project what we are, not what we wish to be. That's such a clever idea. See, if you're genuinely loving, truly, you're going to project that. If you only wish to be loving, then something's going to be missing. We can only project that which we are. If we're negative and we're really, really, really difficult with ourselves and others, that's projected. Again, you only project in life what you are, not what you wish to be. Emerson very colorfully said, "What you are speaks so loudly I can't hear a word you say." Emerson's words further emphasize the idea that our actions speak louder than our words, and there is a spiritual currency that governs the exchanges we make in life. So how do we deal with all the negatives, our judgments? How do we deal with our negative or stinking thinking? Well, first of all, we have to recognize that we pay a very big price for maintaining them. The peace and the joy and the happiness of life are just out of reach until we learn to minimize the negatives. Louise Hay pointed out that when someone uses the word should very often, they will notice people start to pull away from them. Nobody really likes to be criticized. So we want to be more careful about how we criticize ourselves and how we criticize others. And we want to find new ways to encourage ourselves and encourage others. We don't intend to be negative, right? Nobody does. But we certainly pay a price for being negative. Barker was very much preoccupied with getting rid of his negatives in his life. And at different points in this wonderful lesson, he said, I don't know if the world will ever get there, to a place of love and peace. And he says he didn't believe it was going to happen in his lifetime. But he said it's his job to get rid of the negatives in his own life. He said, unless we fully address our negative thinking and feelings, they will have a tendency to resurface. Affirmations and affirmative prayers can bring these negatives to our attention, because if I affirm that I'm wealthy and I'm whole and complete, and something comes up that would suggest, no, you're not wealthy, you're missing this, as we do our prayer process and do our affirmations, sometimes they go through smoothly and there's an acceptance within us. But sometimes, something comes back at us which would suggest, no, I don't really believe this about myself. So that would suggest you've struck gold. There's work to be done. And that's good. It's really good to, figure out where you're blocked so you can then find a way to neutralize and deal with whatever is coming up for you. Both Louise Hay and Raymond Charles Barker suggested that we treat ourselves kindly and not critically when we encounter a negative pattern. First of all, if you're being mindful, you can learn a lot from the negatives. It can be an opportunity to learn about yourself and make necessary adjustments. We absolutely have the power to neutralize and replace any negative pattern if we genuinely desire to do so. Throughout history, spiritual teachers have recognized the value of affirmative thinking to create a better society. And as we do this, we improve our lives and we improve the lives of others. On that given Sunday, Dr. Barker was talking about people who speak about having an average week. And he said he didn't like the word average. And I can say, I've known quite a few religious science ministers in my life, and they don't like the word average either, because I was always told that this is not a teaching for average people. This is a teaching for people who want to experience more. Are you longing for more? And most people are. This is a teaching for people who realize that they can experience more. And it's a teaching for people who desire and know that they're meant to have a more vibrant life. Barker went on to say, we look back on our week, maybe Saturday night or Sunday afternoon, and some of us might think, be thinking about their week. And he stated, what we want to do here in this teaching is not to have an average week. And he went on, I don't want to have next week be like last week. He said, I got through it, but I don't want next week to be like last week. I want something that's fresh, something that's vital, something that's new. In other words, we want to take some new roads and try some new things. We want this week to be fresh with something new, something different, something that didn't happen before, didn't happen last week. And he went on, we want something new. He says, it will be in my life when I affirm it and believe it will be there. He said, we're not people of the past. We are not our parents. We are not the people of psychology. He said, we are, in this teaching, people of metaphysics. We realize that this source is all that there is, and it's in us. And we start with that understanding that God is here, and it's in us, operating through us, and we're one with that power. And so we want to, he said, we're moving into a future of our own creation. So he saw us as creators. He said, we are moving into a future of our own creation. So all your thoughts and thinkings are creating, your thoughts and thinking are creating this very day, this evening, this week. He will say again, we are the present people. We have metaphysical understanding that our ideas are moving us forward towards a future of our own creation. That was a pretty powerful statement back then. We are creating everything, is what he's saying. That's right. You, individually, are creating your own life. He said, please understand, I don't want to be that which is what I have been, which is something easy to do for a while. It's easy to recreate former comfortable ideas for a while. You can do that, but not for long. And he said, that's not what I want anyway. He said, I don't think most of you'd want to be doing that either. You wouldn't be showing up here every morning, 10:45 on Sunday. If you want to keep on repeating the past, my gosh, you can do it. But is that, he said, well, do you want to? He says, that's what most people are doing in the world. They're just going around, looping around, recreating the old beliefs, creating same old stories. He said, the past may have been pleasant because we have a tendency to remember the pleasant parts of the past. But the past never induces fresh concepts in consciousness. Today we can read the great books, or we can listen to the broadcasts of every kind of great thoughts and thinking, and scriptures, philosophy. And all of these books will always be important because you can learn, you can always interpret the ideas in a new way, and you can bring them into your experience today and learn. And make them your own and make them fresh if you put in the effort. The great minds of philosophy and religion have always had valuable things for us. Barker said he didn't recommend, for example, the textbook for most people. Textbook, by the way, is a textbook. It doesn't read like a novel. He said there's other books that are available today that are far better to get started with the teaching. He liked the text, he said, for himself, claiming it stretches his mind. If you start reading it, if you stay with it, it's very good over time. He said, because your mind is limitless in what it can absorb. And you can create the world because you have the power within you to do just about anything. And he said of himself, I'm always looking for something to stretch my mind. I'm not a person of yesterday. I want new information, new experiences. He said, if it's new to me, good, it stretches my consciousness. He said, I need this stretch. Why do I need it? He said, I need it so I can handle my negatives better. He said, you and I are going to be dealing with negatives as long as we are alive. So why not make peace with it and develop a way of handling them that's not exhausting? He says, I'd love to see a perfect world, a utopia. So would you. He said, but the fact is the world is perfect now and it's unfolding in divine order. But if you're looking for there to be a utopia right now, he said, it's not going to happen. Even with all the advances that are happening at incredible speed in science, the consciousness of humankind goes forward somewhat slowly because people are people. And he said there is no mass salvation of consciousness. He says, people are evolving and we're going to have negatives the rest of our lives. The question is, what are you going to do with them? There's no person in the world today, he claimed, that doesn't have problems. Everybody has negatives, he said, though everybody can learn how to minimize them greatly. He wanted to say, I don't believe most of us eliminate our negatives totally. And you may say, well, someday maybe there's going to be peace and love that will be permeating the earth. And he smiled that day and he said, maybe, maybe not. He says, it doesn't look like it's going to happen in my lifetime. He said, but I may be able to create that peace and love myself. And that's the key. He said, each of you can create it for yourself today. And as we do, we'll be lifting ourselves up and we will be lifting others up in the process. Again, we can read great books, we can commune with great minds and ideas, and it's always a good idea to do that rather than just turning on the news or just, hanging with the same old people with the same old discussions. He said, we can commune with great thought. Today we can get a lot of the science of mind again just by reading or listening to Louise Hay's work. Louise Hay has done some of the most important work in the past 75 years. Because if you learn to practice her principles, you're really bringing in much of the science of mind just through her simple book. There's so much available to us now in the way of spiritual riches that can change our life. We do our work in mind, we do our work in consciousness, so you very well may be able to experience extended periods of peace and happiness and joy in your life with this teaching. There's a phrase we use here, which is, we are the cause to our own experience. And I always then say, that doesn't mean we're to blame for anything. It means we are cause to our own experience. I make the distinction because people are habitually blaming themselves and one another for what's happened to them. Where they might go, or they may go to the other extreme and blame themselves for everything. Here's the point on this subject. There's no one to blame. There's only a need for compassion. Realizing that you've done the best you could with what you knew. And you realize, too, that every other person you encounter has also. With this knowledge, we can be free to let it go. Stop criticizing yourself. As soon as you find yourself, stop. Just stop. And as soon as you find yourself being critical of another, stop. People are where they are. So start again and have a new moment, and create a new moment without criticism or condemnation. I only have control over my own thinking and my own consciousness. That's all you really have control of. For many classes over many years, it's been told to me, it's never about the other person. So if you find yourself talking about other people, just stop. It'd be more useful to think, I'm creating this other person to be whatever I'm creating them to be. Stop talking about other people and bring your power back to yourself. Learn to be the guardian at the gate of your own consciousness. Cancel out the thoughts that are negative or that are not compassionate or loving. The whole world can be caught up in a story, but it doesn't have to be true for you. Again, the whole world can be caught up in a story, but it doesn't have to be true for you or for me. Barker went on, for whatever number of years I have ahead of me, He says, I'm likely to have some negatives, and I intend to work on them as soon as possible, the moment I'm aware that I have them. What's the first thing I do? And he says, and the thing I suggest for you is minimize them, neutralize them, take your imagination off of them. That's the first thing. Minimize your negatives. Now you see, you may be one of those kinds of people where you immediately get troubled over something, and you're focused on the negative, and the next thing it mushrooms and it gets out of control. If you give it an hour or two, it's a complete disaster. You know, the whole world is coming to an end. He says, or you see somebody who has a sneeze, and you know, it's 10 minutes later, they think they've got a cold, they must go see a doctor. And there are people who take simple negative thoughts and turn them into disasters. And you don't want to be one of those folks. And they begin to program, he says what they're doing is they're beginning to program their mentality towards problems and dis-ease. I hope no one on the broadcast today is doing this. It only takes a negative thought and some imagination. And oh my goodness, the places you can go with it. You know, another instance, you can hear someone make a negative remark, or you think that they've made a negative remark with you, and then you're off to the races, and you know, your imagination is running wild with it. I think some of us have done this, or you can relate to it. People become convinced of the power of the negative. He said, we have to learn how to slow all this down and take some control over our thought process. Slow down and take a pause and realize that all is well. Barker was fond of asking his audience occasionally, what were you worrying about last year this time in May? What were you worrying about? And he said, chances are 100 to 1 you can't remember. And he said, if I ask you what you were worrying about 5 years ago, he said, nobody remembers. He says, but at the time it was probably a big deal, a catastrophe even. And you thought life would never be the same again. You thought life as you knew it when you were having this big problem was over that you've forgotten about now. See, if you get into practice, if you get into practicing our teaching more and more, and you learn and believe that life is working out perfectly and all is well, you begin to understand and have a faith, and you know you're supplied and supported. You know life is good and all's working out as it ought to. All is well. We teach every week here to trust in the process of life, to know and realize that you live, move, and have your being in this perfect life. Most of the New Thought teachers are always advising people to look to the now, to this present moment. Don't look to the past, please. Who wants to do that? He said, I don't want to go back 5 days or 5 years. The past brought me to the now, and I'm really grateful for its lessons, because I wouldn't be who I am today without it. But I wouldn't want to go back to it either. Now, if you ask me if I want to go back to 10 years ago, I'd say the same thing. No way. And then ask, would you like to go to the future? And he said, no. He says, I like the now. So that was Barker. We teach that we're in the perfect place, perfect time, and all the time. And most of us in this teaching know this by now. So it's interesting, he got phone calls all the time with people complaining. It's interesting when a minister gets calls with people who are really studying, who are calling with all these complaints. When someone's complaining about their boyfriend or their girlfriend or what's wrong, sometimes people really want to grow, so he said you take time with them, you give them information, show them how they are causing the situation, and point out if they change their thinking about the situation, then things are going to change. People who are really invested in this teaching understand that change comes from within and has nothing to do with people, places, and things outside of them. So we pay a high price for negatives when we're being judgmental and we're being negative. If we're working the teaching, we're here to be lifters. We're here to lift ourselves up. We're here to lift other people up. You know, if we're really working the teaching, we minimize the negatives, we minimize that stuff as much as we can. But we're also here to learn what we're supposed to learn from any situation. We can't sometimes move on from a negative until we learn whatever lesson it's there to give us. We don't dwell on it, hopefully we don't ruminate over what's wrong or what's missing or what's been done to us. The better way of looking at it is that in every case, on some level and in some way, we have allowed something into our life. And sometimes people don't like hearing this. I can think of my own sister who used to say, I cannot believe that I had anything to do with this, that, or some situation happening. And of course she did, but she said, I won't accept it, right? And I remember one of my favorite students, Susan, she was so brilliant in so many ways, but she said, I will never, never, never forgive so-and-so and stuff like that. And she says, Greg, you need to get real. And I tried to say with both my sister and Susan, I said, listen, there's nobody to blame here. But you played a role in this. And it doesn't make anybody bad. You don't need to create anyone as a bad person, even though maybe some undesirable things were going on. But if you can't see that you've played a role in your own life, it's going to be very difficult to heal a pattern. If you're continually blaming other people for where you have wound up, it's going to be difficult for you to move forward. You might recall Louise Hay saying that we have these patterns which create, she said, dis-ease in our bodies. And there's no shame to this. Louise Hay had to have 2 operations for cancer, I believe. And she said there's no shame to this, but we need to acknowledge that we create the patterns. And we want to get at the underlying causes. Each of us, if you don't, she says, things are going to resurface. So, point for us to know today, each of us are evolving and learning. We want to learn to identify the negatives and the negative patterns and find a way to minimize them and then release them. If you're caught up in constant worry, it's kind of like re-traumatizing yourself or reconvincing yourself that something is wrong. You don't mean to do it, but you're adding to the negative thing. You're programming it more deeply into your own mind. So what's the first thing that Barker suggested? He said the first thing is to minimize it. We thought, he said, the whole world was going to come to an end when the dollar was devaluated. I don't know what year this was. He said it was a very scary time for people. Everything became very expensive with inflation, but the world did not end. If you recall, the entire world was also going to come to an end when we couldn't get oil. He says, but it didn't come to an end. With all the advancements that were going on, he says, and we find it so difficult to keep up with them all, we find ourselves always listening to some version of the world is coming to an end over this or that. And it's always we're getting it from the news outlets. All you have to do is turn on the daily news. He says, the crises you're going to hear on the news are nothing new. He said, they're as old as humankind. They have always created, he said, we have always created our own problems collectively and individually. He said, I want you to consider minimizing this stuff to the extent you can in your own life, the negativity, and if possible, keep your attention off of it. Because, watch where your attention goes. Remember this, you can be focused on seeing peace instead of problems. You can be focusing on seeing abundance instead of lack. You can see the goodness and you can see the possibility. It's entirely up to you. Minimize your negatives because you pay such a high price for them. It isn't worth the cost. Most people simply drift through life letting circumstance dictate their outcomes. They lack clear vision. They have no idea of what makes them happy or what they want. They don't know who they have come here to be. They don't know that they are the one that they have been looking for. You can have a life of your dreams. All you need is clarity and faith and positive expectancy. And this, if you have this belief, it will propel you forward. You have the ability, everyone on this call, to create a vision for yourself that's far greater than anything you've ever had before, where you can have a future that excites you and motivates you. you can imagine a life filled with personal success and happiness. Having a vision is like having a roadmap for your life. It'll give you direction, purpose, and it will guide your actions. It will give you something to strive for, work towards, and to achieve. It will ignite the fire within you, fueling your determination and perseverance. So think about creating one. Hitch your wagons to the stars. Create something really big and wonderful, because the universe will deliver. When you have a clear vision of what you want to accomplish, suddenly the effort becomes worthwhile. Every moment you invest, every obstacle you encounter, and even setbacks becomes a great stepping stone towards your ultimate success. Dare to dream big and create a compelling future for yourself. Imagine the possibilities and believe in your ability to turn those dreams into reality. Your effort in creating your own best version of yourself is not just worth it, it's essential. It's worth your time, your energy, and your dedication. Be one of the few. Be one of the ones who choose to live the affirmative life in earnest. Put in a little bit of time. Let your positive expectancy guide you to a life beyond your wildest dreams. Your future is waiting. It's time to make it extraordinary. It's worth the effort. It's worth the time. It's worth accepting. Great demonstrations, great lives are not coincidental. Usually they're the result of deliberate actions, thoughtful actions. In our pursuit, we engage with the powerful principle of cause and effect, which affects our thoughts and emotions. It's akin to the law of believing as referred to in the scriptures. Imagine, this was from one of the Gospels, imagine trying to gather figs from thistles. Simply not possible. Just as one teacher wisely said, we can only gather thistles from thistles. Hence, this law of cause and effect is crucial. If I desire genuine positive change, then I must actively program it into my life. I must believe in it. I must release the things that are in the way of it. It won't manifest unless I take the initiative. Sometimes it's like a few steps forward and a few steps backwards. We're all well aware. But we're moving forward regardless. Don't let your imagination run wild with what's wrong and what's missing. Stop ourselves wherever we go towards the negative side of life. In addition to using affirmations and denials, you might try using a journal or a vision board or both. So minimize the negatives as you can, and release them. So in conclusion, everybody, let's consider the high cost of the negatives today and be resolved to release them and replace them with the best kind of thoughts, the positive thoughts, the empowering thoughts. And now I'm going to turn the call over to you, because we're excited to hear your good news, your demonstrations, and how you deal with the negatives in your life. So here we are.